Hello and welcome to our School at Home class in English grade 10. We are in the fourth quarter of our set of lessons and I hope everybody will delight in learning today with lesson number 15, Research Procedure. After going through this self-learning module, you are expected to number 1, understand the procedures to be made when writing a research paper. Number 2, learn how to determine the appropriate research design, method, instrument, sampling method, and statistical treatment suited to the research problem, and evaluate the problem and determine the accurate research method to produce a reliable and valid research paper. For a start, do the following exercise. You can pause this video if you will need more time. Press play again when you're finished with the activity and when you're ready to proceed with the lesson. Direction. Identify the term being described by the following statements below. Write the letter that corresponds to your answer on the blank before the number. Number 1. Generally, Chapter 3 presents a blank to be used in the study. Letter A. Results. B. Conclusion. C. Methods. D. Bibliography. Number 2. It is the framework of research methods and techniques chosen by the researcher. Letter A. Statistical method. B. Sampling technique. C. Research design. And letter D. Research instrument. Number 3. It aims at discovering how many people think, act, or feel in a specific way. Letter A. Qualitative method. B. Quantitative method. C. Qualitative and quantitative methods. Or letter D. None of the above. Number 4. It involves collecting and analyzing non-numerical data like text, video, or audio to understand concepts, opinions, or experiences. Letter A. Quantitative method. B. Qualitative method. C. Quantitative and qualitative methods. D. None of the above. Number 5. It is a tool used to collect, measure, and analyze data related to your subject. Letter A. Design. B. Instrument. C. Methods. D. Statistics. Let us now check your answer. The answer for number 1 is letter C. Methods. Number 2, the answer is letter C. Research design. Number 3, the answer is letter B. Quantitative method. Number 4, the answer is letter B. Qualitative method. And the answer for number 5 is letter B. Research instrument. In the previous lesson, you have learned how to write a Chapter 2 research paper, review of related literature. This time, you will be learning how to write a Chapter 3 of research paper, research procedure. Do you have any idea on the procedures to be used in gathering data on your research paper? Look at the photos. Why are doctors and nurses called as modern heroes? Not all heroes were Gates. In the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, the real heroes were rocks. Home quarantined citizens expressed love for the doctors and nurses on the front lines of the global COVID-19 outbreak, even as it spreads across much of the world. However, despite their kindness in helping people infected with coronavirus, people still express their concerns that they might be carriers of virus too. Is it fair to judge someone as virus carrier based on his profession? How can you identify the veracity of reports? This can be done by following a systematic data gathering. How can you attain a methodical research procedure? Today, we are going to discuss the research procedure or research methodology. Have you been doubtful on the veracity of research results posted online or printed materials? I'm sure you have. What procedures or methods and tools should you undertake to produce valid and reliable research paper? What are being discussed and presented in Chapter 3 of Research Paper? What is methodology in research paper writing? It refers the discussion regarding the specific methods chosen and used in a research paper. This discussion also encompasses the theoretical concepts that further provide information about the method selection and application. What is research design? It is the framework of research methods and techniques chosen by a researcher. The design allows researchers to hone in on research methods that are suitable for the subject matter and set up their studies up for success. There are two classifications of research design. Number one, quantitative research design is aimed at discovering how many people think, act, or feel in a specific way. Quantitative projects involve large sample sizes concentrating on the quantity of responses. Second, qualitative research design. It is a research that involves collecting and analyzing non-numerical data like text, video, or audio to understand concepts, opinions, or experiences. It can be used to gather in-depth insights into a problem or generate new ideas for research. Types of quantitative research design. Number one, descriptive research. It seeks to describe the current status of an identified variable. These research projects are designed to provide systematic information about a phenomenon. The researcher does not usually begin with a hypothesis, but is likely to develop one after collecting data. The analysis and synthesis of the data provide the test of the hypothesis. Systematic collection of information requires careful selection of the unit studied and careful measurement of each variable. For example, a description of how second grade students spend their time during summer vacation. Letter B. A description of the kinds of physical activities that typically occur in nursing homes and how frequently each occurs. The second type of quantitative research design is correlational research. It attempts to determine the extent of a relationship between two or more variables using statistical data. In this type of design, relationships between and among a number of facts are sought and interpreted. For examples, letter A, the relationship between intelligence and self-esteem. Letter B, the relationship between diet and anxiety. The third type of quantitative research design is causal comparative or quasi-experimental research. It attempts to establish cause and effect relationships among the variables. These types of designs are very similar to true experiments, but with some key differences. An independent variable is identified but not manipulated by the experimenter. For example, the effect of physical attendance on social maturity at the end of the first grade, and the effect of taking multivitamins on a student's school absenteeism. The fourth type of quantitative research design is experimental research. It strictly adheres to a scientific research design. It includes a hypothesis, a variable that can be manipulated by the researcher, and variables that can be measured, calculated, and compared. The researcher collects data and results will either support or reject the hypothesis. Examples: the effect of a new treatment plan on breast cancer, and the effect of positive reinforcement on attitude towards school. Types of qualitative research design. Number one, ethnology. The researcher immerses himself to the target participant's environment to understand the goals, cultures, challenges, motivations, and themes that emerge. For example, working with a teacher who prefers structural activities with clear time and space boundaries for one specific purpose. The second type of quantitative research design is narrative. The researcher weaves together a sequence of events, usually from just one or two individuals, to form a cohesive story. Conduct in-depth interviews, read documents, and look for themes. In other words, how does an individual story illustrate the larger life influences that created it? These approaches typically focus on the lives of individuals as told through their own stories. The third type is case study. A case study is a research approach that is used to generate an in-depth, multifaceted understanding of a complex issue in its real-life context. It is an established research design that is used extensively in a wide variety of disciplines, particularly in the social sciences. For example, an investigation into the reasons of the global financial and economic crisis of 2008 to 2010. What is research sample? Sample is a group of people, objects, or items that are taken from a larger population for measurement. It should be representative of the population to ensure that we can generalize the findings from the research sample to the population as a whole. Data collection for quantitative research. Number 1, probability sampling. A definitive method of sampling carried out by utilizing some form of random selection and enabling researchers to make a probability statement based on data collected at random to a targeted demographic. One of the best things about probability sampling is it allows researchers to collect the data from representatives of the population they are interested in studying. Types of probability sampling. Number 1, simple random sampling is a subset of a statistical population in which each member of the subset has an equal probability of being chosen. An example of simple random sampling would be the names of 25 employees being chosen out of a hat from a company of 250 employees. The second type of data collection method for quantitative research is non-probability sampling. It is defined as a sampling technique in which the researcher selects samples based on the subjective judgment of the researcher rather than random selection. It is a less strict method. This sampling method depends heavily on the expertise of the researchers. There are types of non-probability sampling. The first one is convenience sampling. It is when the samples are selected from the population only because they are conveniently available to the researcher. Researchers choose these samples just because they are easy to recruit, and the researcher did not consider selecting a sample that represents the entire population. For example, a new NGO wants to establish itself in 20 cities. It selects the top 20 cities to serve based on the proximity to where they're based. The second one is consecutive sampling. It is very similar to convenience sampling with a slight variation. Here, the researcher picks a single person or a group of a sample, conducts her research over a period, analyzes the results, and then moves on to another subject or group if needed. What is a research instrument? A research instrument is a tool used to collect, measure, and analyze data related to your subject. Research instruments can be tests, surveys, scales, questionnaires, or even checklists. Data collection method for quantitative research. Number 1, surveys or questionnaires. Surveys or questionnaires created using online survey software are playing a crucial role in online data collection, be it quantitative or qualitative research. Types of questions in a questionnaire are: letter A, dichotomous question. It is generally a yes or no close-ended questions. Letter B, multiple choice. It is a close-ended questions in which a respondent has to select one from the options. Data collection method for quantitative research. Number 2, Likert scale questions. It is a type of questions used to measure attitudes or opinions. Respondents are asked to rate items on a level of agreement. For example, strongly agree, neutral, disagree, or strongly disagree. The following are data collection methods for qualitative research. Number 1 is the interview. It is generally a qualitative research technique which involves asking open-ended questions to converse with respondents and collect data about the subject. Interviews are conducted with a sample from a population, and the key characteristic they exhibit is their conversational tone. Number 2, focus group discussion. It involves gathering people from similar backgrounds or experiences together to discuss a specific topic of interest. It is a form of qualitative research where questions are asked about their perceptions, attitudes, beliefs, opinions, or ideas. Third, observational. It is one of the oldest and most fundamental research methods approaches. This approach involves collecting data using one's senses, especially looking and listening in a systematic and meaningful way. Fourth, document analysis. It is a form of qualitative research in which documents are interpreted by the researcher to give voice and meaning around an assessment topic. Analyzing documents incorporates coding content into themes similar to how focus group or interview transcripts are analyzed. Validation of research instruments. Why should a research questionnaire be validated? The purpose of validating a research instrument is to ensure that the instrument used is measuring what it's supposed to measure. Questionnaire is one of the most widely used tools to collect data in especially social science research. The main objective of questionnaire in research is to obtain relevant information in most reliable and valid manner. What is statistical treatment? It is a catch-all term which means to apply any statistical method to your data and to interpret the gathered data. The first one is percentage. Percent simply means per hundred. 1% is 100 of the total or whole and is therefore calculated by dividing the total or whole number by 100. It can be used to, letter A, to enable data with different sample sizes or totals to be compared, or letter B, to quantify the amount of change over time. Number 2, measures of central tendency. A measure of central tendency is a single value that attempts to describe a set of data by identifying the central position within the set of data. Number 1 is mean. It is defined as all the scores for a variable added together and then divided with the number of observations. It aims to provide an accurate description of the entire data. It is the single value that is most typical or representative of the collected data. The mean can be used to get an overall idea or the picture of the data set. Mean is the best use for a data set with numbers that are close together. One large or small number might skew the mean, but the median can often give you a better idea of the data. Next to mean is median. The median is a middle value. It is the value that splits the data set in half. To find the median, order your data from smallest to largest and then find a data point that has an equal amount of values above it and below it. The third one is mode. It is the value that occurs the most frequently in your data set. Let's see how much you've learned so far. Before we proceed with the next part of our lesson, let us first have practice exercises on a research procedure. The following statements are grouped according to each part of the research methodology. Identify whether the researcher takes accurate steps in research paper writing. Put a check mark if it is and X if it is not. Letter A for research design. Number 1. The researcher used quantitative research design because he wanted to discover the number of people who lost their job because of COVID-19. Number 2. The researcher used qualitative research design because he wanted to get the comprehensive effects of the pandemic. Letter B for research sample. Number 3. The researcher used simple random sampling because he got 50 samples by picking one representative from 500 population. Number 4. The researcher used convenience sampling because not everyone can possibly be a subject or affected to his research problem. Letter C. Research instrument. 5. The researcher does not need to validate his research tool before distributing them to his samples. Number 6. The researcher uses the appropriate research instrument suited to the problem of his research paper. Letter D. Statistical treatment. The researcher used median as a statistical treatment because he got the score of the students by adding them together and divide them by the number of students observed. Number 8. The researcher used mean as a statistical treatment by determining the score that most of the students got from the test. Time's up! Let us now check your answer. If you answered check for number 1, you are correct because quantitative research design aims at discovering how many people think, act, or feel in a specific, and the researcher wanted to discover the number of people who lost their job because of COVID-19. If you answered check for number 2, you are correct because qualitative research design involves collecting and analyzing non-numerical data to understand concepts, and the researcher wanted to get a comprehensive effects of the pandemic. If you answered check for number 3, you are correct because a simple random sampling is a subset of a statistical population in which each member of the subset has an equal probability of being chosen, and the researcher chose 10% samples over representatives from 500 population. If you answered check for number 4, you are correct because convenience sampling is a non-probability sampling technique where samples are collected from the population only because they are conveniently available to the researcher. If you answered X for number 5, you are correct because the researcher needs to ensure that the instrument used is measuring what it's supposed to measure by means of validating it. If you answered check for number 6, you are correct because the researcher needs to use the appropriate research instrument that will suit to his research problem. If you answered X for number 7, you are correct because median is a middle value and it is a value that splits the dataset in half. If you answered X for number 8, you are correct because mean is when all the scores for a variable are added together and then divided by the number of observations. Understanding the research procedure is synonymous to understanding the importance of kindness, empathy, and respect to mankind, and especially to the frontliners because both require following procedures to achieve a common goal. Furthermore, it helps us get a solution to a problem, gives training to apply them to a problem, and it provides us the necessary training in choosing methods, materials, scientific tools, and training and techniques relevant for the problem chosen. Let us recap what we had discussed from this lesson. Read each statement and choose the best term being described. Number 1. It is a group of people, objects, or items that are taken from a larger population for measurement. Letter A. Sample. B. Questionnaire. Or letter C. Statistical treatment. Number 2. A research blank is a tool used to collect, measure, and analyze data related to your subject. Letter A. Survey. B. Instrument. Or letter C. Sample. Number 3. Research blank is a framework of research methods and techniques chosen by a researcher. Letter A. Instrument. Letter B. Design. Or letter C. Statistical instrument. Number 4. They are the persons who have been invited to participate in a particular study and have actually taken part in the study. Letter A. Sample. B. Instrument. Or letter C. Respondents. Number 5. It is a catch-all term which means to apply any statistical method to your data and to interpret the gathered data. Letter A. Research instrument. B. Statistical method. Or letter C. Research design. Now that we have learned about the procedures to follow in writing a research paper, why is it important to observe the appropriate procedures when conducting and writing a research paper? Yes, we must always be guided on the design to be used, methods in choosing our respondents, validating the research instrument, and the appropriate statistical treatment to be used. We all must depend on the nature of problem of your research paper. For the post-test direction, complete the following sentences by choosing the appropriate word or phrases amongst choices. Write the letter of your choice in the space before the number. Number 1. The following are parts of Chapter 3 except for A. Research design, B. Research instrument, letter C. Statistical treatment, or letter D. Related literature and studies. Number 2. The researcher conducts a research study to understand the amount of time a doctor takes to tend to a patient when the patient walks into the hospital. What research designs should he or she use? Letter A. Quantitative, B. Qualitative, letter C. Quantitative and qualitative, or letter D. None of the above. Number 3. The researcher wants to figure out the effects of newly manufactured vaccine to persons under investigation of COVID-19. What quantitative research designs should he or she use? Letter A. Descriptive, letter B. Correlational, C. Causal, or letter D. Experimental. Number 4. The researcher wants to know the respondents' level of agreement on the idea of extending the community quarantine period in Metro Manila. What type of questionnaire should he or she use? Letter A. Dichotomous, B. Multiple choice, C. Interview, or letter D. Likert scale. Number 5. The researcher wants to determine the preferred learning styles of grade 10 Rizal High School students. What measure of central tendency should he or she use? Letter A. Mean, B. Mode, C. Median, or letter D. Percentage.
Do you want to